Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to round 2 of the Swarbrick.com Former Alpha Championship for 2023. It is good to be back watching some single-seater cars as well as the touring cars that we had last week. Apologies that I couldn't make the first round at Zandvoort. It looks to be quite an interesting track car combination, with Matt Daly taking the top prizes in both races in the end here. We're just in qualifying now, though, for round 2 with just over 10 minutes to go here at Monza. What a race this should be. I suspect maybe just as interesting as the Formula 1 race that we've just had. It's nice to have, actually, with Zandvoort and Monza, a couple of interesting rounds of Formula 1 in comparison to what we've had so far this year. Now, you may see, and this may be familiar, in fact, if you were watching the touring car race last week, there is a certain lack of FPS at some parts of the track. I do apologise for that. My current graphics card is my proper graphics card is out of commission at this point in time. My fault for using an ex-mining card, I suppose. But that does mean that for now, for the next week, we're on a GT 1030. So we hope to have that issue resolved here. As you see, actually, it is struggling a little bit at some parts of the circuit, but we hope to have that resolved in the next week or so. So at this point in time in qualifying, it is actually Andy Brammer on top with a P1 here with a 130.2. Moving then to Will Inglis. Will Inglis, an impressive time here. That is a very strange glitch, isn't it? An impressive time here, 130.391, as Will Inglis decides that that's all he can do for this stint. Dives back in to the pits this time around. Then it is Barry Clayton with 131.573, and then Alex Smith running this evening with a 132.686. We'll be back in just a moment. There's a couple of cars out on track at this point in time. We'll be out, back in just a moment, though, once we've had a couple of technical issues resolved, so I do apologise for that one. And we are back live again now. I've given everything a quick kind of reboot. Let's see if this is looking a little bit better now. I can tell you, though, the order still hasn't changed at this point in time. It is still Andy Brammer, Will Inglis, Barry Clayton, and then Alex Smith. They're on board at the moment with Barry Clayton in that ever-luminescent lime green / yellow livery that he's now become so well associated with. That number 1 plate car there now heading down through the two Lesmos. As we head through Ascari now, this is actually the only real sort of technical part of this track per se. Obviously you've got the two Lesmos, that's all about making sure you are braking enough to make sure the car grips up and heads through those two right-handers without dipping onto the gravel there, because that will cost you. But there is turn 4 as well. But straight after Ascari, you've got the quick left, right, left, which if you're very brave you might be able to sort of beeline it there, take a good racing line. There is that strange black mass of pixels again. It seems to be hovering over my car. So in between qualifying and the race, I'll do my best to get this resolved. But after that, you have the Curva Parabolica heading around that long right-hander once again. This is, of course, a clockwise circuit, and that really energises the tyres. In fact, there are plenty of points on this track that do energise the tyres very well indeed. No, we are allowed to see... It's something to do with the back of Will Inglis's car. Will, what type of adult content have you put on the back of your car here that determines that we're not allowed to see it? The car is being censored. This is... I have never seen this before. This is very strange indeed. So at the moment, it's just one car out on track, and that is Alex Smith. Alex Smith, I've just been chatting to him, actually, in the behind-the-scenes comms. We're discussing what will be a faster graphics card, the GT1030 or his integrated GPU. And at the moment, it seems to be the GT1030 is the winner, I can confirm. It did well in the touring car round last time round, and it seems to be serving Alex Smith relatively well. He's on a 32.2 at this point in time. He needs to close up about another second and a half. So race one, it should be very interesting indeed. We know Alex Smith is a quick driver. It should be a fairly close field in terms of pace, albeit a small field, a close field nonetheless. So less than 3 minutes to go in this session, and we'll be back in just a moment. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are on the grid now for race 1 here at Monza. We've got a couple more guys joining in, which is good to see. And we are going to wait and see if the weird portal to the unknown, as it has been coined, has been rectified just yet. It's Paul Brady on pole. Apologies before saying that was Andrew Brammett. It is Paul Brady. Andrew Brammett is in P6, so it's Paul Brady, Will Inglis, Barry Clayton, Alex Smith, Matt Daly, Andrew Brammett, and Jack Hodson rounding out the field here at Monza. So we know turn 1 is one of the prime overtaking opportunities, and it's the first corner, of course, as we start this new race. It's 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away. Puffs of smoke from everyone there as Paul Brady applies a lot of throttle straight onto the push-to-pass system in order to try and make up that deficit. But it is Will Inglis with a much better launch heading into that first corner now. In fact, Matt Daly as well gaining a position as he worked his way down towards that first right-hander. It's looking very good for him indeed. He had a fantastic first outing in this series at the start of the, well, it was just a fortnight ago, in fact. Whereas he's now battling Will Inglis this time around, so its victory might not be quite on the cards just yet, because Will Inglis is certainly going to put up a good fight, and that is the back end of Matt Daly's car stepping out. He was in P2, now tumbles all the way down to P7. Not a great start to the race for him then. He's going to make it just a little bit harder, a little bit more interesting for himself as we head later on into the lap. Now running down towards Ascari in just a moment. It's still Will Inglis, only about half a second clear of Paul Brady, despite his, shall we say, rather successful battle with Matt Daly on that previous couple of corners then. As we head through for the first time we head through the Ascari complex, and it's still Will Inglis in the lead here. Alex Smith in P3, and Matt Daly in the background there. Oh dear, a fairly massive accident for him at the start of this race at Ascari. Tumbles straight into the wall there. I suspect there could be some type of braking issue with his setup, or just in general with his car, because we saw it was actually looked like a rear lockup almost heading around the lap for the first time that he went round, and then obviously just didn't slow down in any way, shape or form for the Ascari corners, and that sees him now out of this race, unfortunately. Let's see if we'll see him later on this evening, as Alex Smith heading into that first corner. Great move under brakes, sees himself back up into 3rd position. Now Alex is also suffering from some performance issues and is on a controller as well, so despite the disadvantages he is deciding to provide himself with, he is doing a rather good job. I say disadvantage, the man is probably one with his PS5 controller at this point in time. You probably don't see him without it. I know he, I believe, in fact, I say no, I believe it made an appearance at National Alpha Day. What can I say? You know, they are all in one, and that is a big slide for Alex Smith there. Well held. That goes for catch of the day, I think. That is Alex Smith there. Barry Clayton, unfortunately, didn't quite have the same look as he headed through the first Lesmo there. I'm not sure if that was a bit of contact between two cars or whether that was just two separate incidents there. We didn't quite get to see the full picture. Either way, though, out in front as Will Inglis, the back end of his car is looking a little bit blurry, although at least for once we can in fact see it. Was certainly not plain sailing through Ascari that time around for Will Inglis either. We head now into Parabolica, and it's still Will Inglis in the lead by about half a second. Now these two are going to take the absolute life out of their tires now as we head through this first full lap of the track to 131.79 and a 131.78 for Will Inglis. So the top two then lapping well, but not quite at qualifying pace just yet, which we don't necessarily expect at the start of the race given the fuel loads. So it'll be interesting to see how these two leaders manage their tyres here, because Alex Smith is looking like he's got a decent amount of pace underneath him here at Monza. So certainly not out of the mix here. As speaking of in the mix, it's Jack Hodson and Barry Clayton, as they are very firmly battling heading into that first corner, as they had plenty of switchbacks and are still in fact side by side now as we head round towards the middle part of the lap here. It is Barry Clayton just about in front for this moment, but I'm sure there'll be another challenge from Jack Hodson in just a moment. Hopefully a little bit easier though than Oscar Piastri and Lewis Hamilton through this corner. We don't want to see any unfortunate collisions at this stage of the race, and it looks to be that Jack Hudson might be about to have an unfortunate collision with a wall there. Did you see how close that was to kind of snapping back at him there as he went across the gravel like Perez did actually in the practice sessions? A bit of single-seater rallycross seems to be the theme here at Monza. And of course, another detail of this beautiful, I'm going to say, Paya track that we're running, the Monza 23 layout here, as that is a big collision for Jack Hudson. He gets back on track, but that looked very messy indeed. That allows Barry Clayton to breathe just that little bit more into this race. But yes, we'll call it the Paya track. Apologies if I got the name wrong there, but it is a really nice update to the Monza layout. One detail that is unfortunately missing in real life is, well, not just the ominous fans staring into the camera no matter which angle it is looking at, but it's the trees. The trees, they disappeared after a storm in the region a little while back, and unfortunately that now Monza in real life looks a little bit more bare. But I'm pleased to say here in the world of sim racing, Monza still has plenty of trees lining the track now. Will Inglis has been able to extend this lead to about 2.5 seconds, 2.2 seconds at this point in time, in comparison to Paul Brady. Paul Brady keeping up with him well, though. We'll have a look at their pace in just a moment's time. But Alex Smith, after I thought he might be able to perhaps catch up to the battle that was going on in front of him, hasn't been able to do so. He was pretty much matching their pace, but now that Will Inglis has broke free, has found a little bit of extra pace under his foot, has unfortunately for Alex, has remained whereabouts he is on the track. That 13-second delta now to Will Inglis up in front. Barry Clayton, 18 seconds down. Then we have Paul Brady apologies, that's Andy Brammer in P5, and then we have Jack Hudson. Now I believe, as you can see there, Matt Daly rejoining the race. That seems to be some sort of technical issue, so I imagine now Matt Daly is going to treat this as a little bit of a practice session, if you will, for race 2. The reverse good race coming up in a little while. Which of course he'll be in very good stead for, because if he gets that extra practice in this race, he'll also be on the front row of the grid, owing to the reverse grid nature of the how things work in a reverse grid race. But it's still 2 seconds between Will Inglis and Paul Brady at this point in time. No one else is any closer, so we will get some times for you in just a moment's time. So here we are following Jack Hudson as he is, after that unfortunate couple of laps, a little bit off the rest of the field here. There is behind him, I believe that is Paul Brady. In fact, no, we have switched over to Will Inglis. Paul Brady actually closing up. That was a fantastic middle sector on this lap. He's looking to be about half a second quicker, in fact, as we can see some issues there, so apologies for that one. But yes, so Paul Brady half a second quicker on this lap. Barry Clayton also making some good time on this lap as well, but to tune of about 1.8 seconds in fact, so this will be his new fastest lap as we head through the rest of this race. So in terms of pace at the moment, it is Will Inglis, a 131.581, and then it's 131.1 for his best lap, and then for Paul Brady in terms of his current pace, it's 131.0, so about half a second quicker, confirming that then in comparison to Will Inglis. But Will Inglis potentially responding to that charge now. He's looking good on his current predicted time. Here, that could be another half a second made for him. But Paul Brady's best lap, a 131.042, so that previous lap, of course, being his best. That is the fastest lap of this race so far. Now, Barry Clayton, his fastest lap so far was that last lap, a 131.7, and he's looking to improve again on this next lap. So I think now that the fuel load has dipped off just a little bit, the tyres are in a nice warm window now. They haven't worn off too much. This could be the quickest part of this race. The fastest times are really starting to tumble in now. Alex Smith, likewise for him. He's currently in the 133s, so I'm sure he'd like to dip into the 132s if possible. board then with Willingless and Paul Brady, as they are both heading down the start-finish straight, both using that push-to-pass system in fact. So clearly the ante has been upped, if you will, as Alex Smith looks to have had a fairly substantial incident here. He has some major front wing damage to boot as well. This is a disaster for his race. I can tell you that front wing is now pretty much non-existent, in fact, which is not what he needs at this stage, dropping down to 4th behind his nearest rival now. It was looking like it could have been a good one for Alex Smith in this race. Unfortunately for him, there were glimpses of pace at the very start. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't to be in race 1. We'll have to wait for race 2 then. Now, on board with Paul Brady and Willingless, the battle for the lead continues on now as we head around the Lesmos here. It's a purple sector for Paul Brady that time around, a 33.7 in comparison to Willingless' 33.8, so they are still very close though. But Paul Brady at this point in time, I would say, has the upper hand in terms of pace, both current pace and overall fastest lap. Now heading through Ascari before we run down towards the corner, which has been named the Curva Alberta. I'm always going to call it the Parabolica, though. It's just what I am used to at this point in time. Willingless appears to have had a fairly big issue. I don't know how I missed that one, though, on the exit of Ascari. After leading this race for a good number of laps now, 6 laps in fact, he now finds himself back in the pits repairing his car after losing both his front and rear wing. So it turns out that the pressure from Paul Brady was enough in the end. Paul Brady has the upper hand for certain now. As we head closer and closer to the halfway stage of this race, things are looking rather good for Paul Brady. "20 seconds to Barry Clayton behind now. And that is his nearest rival. I'm surprised. It's not often we see a mistake like that from Willingless. It seems to be. It's not all too often yet that we see that type of mistake. Now Paul Brady just has to bring this car home. It should be relatively easy for him now, unless he has any issues of his own. It's funny to mention that we were saying. That Ascari is often the only type of really technical part of the lap here at Monza, and unfortunately for Willingless, it's all come to an end. Now I do actually have confirmation. We are able to have a quick look, and the stewards are telling us that as Willingless crashed, it was a fairly major impact. I was going to have to see him dive into the pits. Actual flames exploded out of the car as he made contact with the wall at Ascari there, so some serious speeds involved, and it is going to be approximately 4 minutes before Willingless is able to jump back into that car, so that is his race over. Now, I believe Matt Daly was out of the car for around about 4 minutes, perhaps a little bit more than that, but it could still be the case that Matt Daly and Willingless are able to have some form of battle. I'm not quite sure if that will be possible, but it'd be very interesting to see if that's the case. Two very fast drivers relegated to the back end of the field. Of course, though, it'll mean great things, though, for the reverse grid race coming up in a little while. Meanwhile, Paul Brady is dipping back into the slightly more comfortable regions of the lap board, shall we say. It's a 131.5 on that last lap, so giving his tyres a chance to breathe, although he is being hunted down somewhat by Paul Brady to the tune of about half a second a lap, and this lap is looking a little bit faster this time round. A 130.4 potentially on the cards here. Apologies, I know you can no longer see the predicted calculations here. Just every time I do, my FPS decides to drop down to approximately 4. So I'll see what I can do about that in the second race. Willingless, meanwhile, is currently, I was about to say he's currently on, so he's currently sat in the pits. Matt Daly, though, is setting some purple sectors as he is out on track at this point in time. A 28.8 through the middle sector. That is, by quite some margin, the quickest middle sector we have seen so far. So it's a great shame that his race became undone so early on, because he seems to have some fairly rapid pace here. Wants to build on the fortunes of the first round out at Zandvoort. So still Barry Clayton closing down that gap now. Purple sector 1, in fact, on that previous lap, and he's looking to make another half a second here. We'll go on board with him as he comes across the line. It was a 33.5 through that first purple sector, then a low 29 as well, so strong through the mid sector, but clearly Barry Clayton running a little bit lower downforce. Now, the setup is an interesting part of running at Monza, in fact, because it's one of the highest average speed laps in the world, as we see Barry Clayton using that push-to-pass system there. Speeds exceeding 220 miles an hour in some categories. We're over 207 at some points, apparently, according to the timing system here. But either way, I'm not sure I entirely trust that number, but either way, very quick speeds here at Monza, and that's because you just run no wing whatsoever, really. You can crank in a little bit of front wing, however, that will upset the balance ever so slightly. The aim of the game, though, is to have as flat of a rear wing as possible. Although you might not see that change on the car model, that certainly is changing in the physics engine. So interesting to see that drivers may be opting at some points to go for a little bit higher wing in order for some more stability, in order to ensure the tyres are better looked after, because of course the less wing you have, the less downforce equals less grip, and the less grip means the tyres are working just that little bit harder, or perhaps scrubbed across the surface of the tarmac a little bit more, and it will be worn down quicker. So drivers with more aero might find themselves with better tyres later on into the race and might find themselves with the upper hand, but drivers like Barry Clayton here, who's just set a 1:30.4, so it's by far and away the quickest car on track at this point in time, with low wing setups here, might find themselves flying along through those Sector 1 and Sector 3 parts of the lap, although I should mention it looks to be that has turned around now, and actually it's the middle sector that is strongest for Barry Clayton. So I'm not quite sure what his setup is looking like. I can tell you that Matt Daly has consistently had his personal bests and often fastest sectors through the first and third sector, so that could be a car that is dominating the speed traps. We used to actually have a breakdown of what cars were doing through the speed traps, but that seems to have disappeared, which is a great shame, because that would be really handy for a circuit just like this. On board then, still with Barry Clayton at this point in time, that gap slowly closing down now to about 16 seconds. I'd say if we had a little bit longer in this race, we could be on for quite an exciting battle here. Now, I should mention that Paul Brady, Jack Hodson, actually quite close together on track now. Jack Hodson has been slowly but surely catching back up to the field, given the deficit that he had after that massive incident earlier in the race. He now sees quite a good opportunity here for some more points, and there'll be good points as well. A battle for P4 just on the horizon. Then Barry Clayton, meanwhile, with a strong purple sector through the middle sector, 28.8, sees him now only 15 seconds off the lead of this race, so potentially a little bit of a higher aero setup, not the initial low aero that I thought he was running for him. Bouncing over the relatively large sausage curbs there. That less of a concern in these cars and in Assetto Corsa, but in real life, those ground effect F1 cars, certainly not particularly fond of running over those big juts in the ground like that, though. We are now watching this battle between Jack Hodson and Andrew Brammer, apologies, heading now side by side down towards Ascari. It is going to be Jack Hodson who has the inside line. Does he need to go later on the brakes? Yes, he will have to if he wants to get that move done. But as we know, an overtake into Ascari is really rather brave. So he's going to try and wait for the run around the Parabolica, I feel. Both on that push-to-pass system now, giving them the best opportunity heading into that right-hander. That is another case of bravery. How wide do you dare push yourself in order to carry more speed? Because the more speed you carry around the Parabolica, you find yourself in a better stead on to the start-finish straight. As it is still Andrew Brammer who leads down onto that start-finish straight, but not for long. That seems to be the case. No, in fact, Jack Hodson's going to have to dive behind as we run down towards turn one once again. Benefiting from that slipstream ever so slightly. Has the inside for the first corner. Has he gone too late on the brakes? Yes, he has. Has to dive through the escape road here. And Jack Hodson at one point in fourth. is in a rather precarious position now. He has to wait, by the looks of things, in order to try and rejoin the circuit. Here is now a lap down, has been lapped by his competitors, and that is a shame for Jack Hudson in this race. That was hotting up to be quite the battle, and now we see Andrew Brammer back into P4, Jack Hudson P5, and into the pits as well. What a shame then. It is Paul Brady still leading this race by about 15 seconds. He's just posted a couple more purple sectors on that previous lap we were otherwise occupied, of course. A gap actually now building up ever so slightly to about 18 seconds. I'm not sure what's happened with Barry Clayton's car there. I expect some sort of minor off, potentially a visit into the gravel. Either way, he seems to be back underway now. And can settle back in, potentially try and make ground up in the final 3 minutes of this race, although I would say 3 minutes ago this race is looking a little bit more settled at this point in time. Now, we can't see his times directly on screen, but I can tell you that Matt Daly, we'll go on board him now, is absolutely flying along. It's a 1:31.5 his last lap, his best a 1:30.2. That's the fastest lap of this race so far, I should mention. But it was a 1:30.4 as he just crossed the line here, because he's still posting blistering Sector 1 and now for the first time a purple Sector 2. Alex Smith not to be outdone though. We're going to go on board with him. He's just posted a purple sector, Sector 1. That's a 33.5. So it seems to be tyre wear. Potentially not too much of a shock. Not too much of a concern here at Monza. While these cars do put plenty of energy through the tyres, and in this Italian sunshine, you have very few corners to actually worry about that. If anything, it's only really going to be the left-hand tyre that really stresses out. But it's all about the fuel load, it seems to be, because the time really tumbling down out in the final couple of minutes of this race. It's a 33.5 for Alex Smith on that previous sector. It looks to be a little bit slower, actually, on this lap. So not sure, maybe petering off towards the end of this lap. Either way, still the pace picking up for quite a couple of drivers now as we go back on board with Andrew Brammer. Apologies, no, as we go back on board with Paul Brady. One day, I promise, one day I will get those two less confused. But for now, that confusion is going to persist, it seems. As the top three, the podium sitters, if you will, the only three drivers will actually be on the lead lap of this race now. Quite a pace delta, as it turns out, between the top end of the field and those in the midfield. As we can see that through the speed trap, Paul Brady, 185 miles an hour down that start-finish straight. Not the fastest car we've seen through the start-finish straight. I believe the accolade goes to Barry Clayton. We've seen 187 miles an hour. We might have seen a couple of drives into the 190s that I have missed, so apologies if I have. But still an impressive amount of pace from these cars. They don't. It's interesting, actually. I suspect because they don't quite have those really peaky high-speed highs. They've got around about 700 horsepower thereabouts with these V6 engines. They don't seem to differ too much in outright top speed based on the setup that the cars are running. Now, obviously, that will differ on the type of track, but if you whack a load of wing on these cars, I don't see too much difference really in the straight line speed. I expect things like the push-to-pass systems certainly help with that, but still, very fast cars, these RSS Supremes, especially when you consider what we started out with. We did, of course, start out with the Formula Alfa, that old Tarsus Formula Alfa. What a fine machine that is. It's a really easy car to get to grips with. It's got a very shallow learning curve, but you can get great pace out of it. Some odd handling characteristics here or there, but still a good, stable, steady platform really to start off your sim racing career. Of course, that is powered by an Alfa Romeo engine out of the box, as was, I believe, W Series and, of course, Italian F4. So why that wasn't, why we weren't shouting from the hilltops about that a little bit more, not quite sure. The gap then between Paul Brady and Barry Clayton still stands at about 15 seconds as we are now closing off this race in just a moment's time. It is Paul Brady who has led a fine race in the end. Willingliss, unfortunately, faltering early on under the pressure of Paul Brady. But Paul Brady did an almighty job to keep up with that race leader, actually dropping back to P3 after a poor start, let's not forget. But still find himself in a position to take back the race lead and, as it stands, take the race victory. It's been an almighty drive for him. It should be a great benefit for his championship charge here in Monza. Only round 2, of course, so it's still all to play for in this championship. So drivers, don't be quite put off by Matt Daly's crushing speed so far in this championship. As we see then, it is Barry Clayton, apologies there, I'll try again. That is Paul Brady who crosses the line. As you can see, it's a little bit difficult for us to follow along, so I do apologise for that one, but it is Paul Brady who crosses the line to take the race 1 victory. Here we have Barry Clayton coming home in just a moment's time. And then we have, in just a moment's time, I was about to say it's Alex Smith crossing the line, but that appears to be not the case, because he's just had a fairly nasty impact with a barrier there. Andrew Brammer comes home P4, Willingliss P5, Jack Hudson yet to be classified by the looks of things. Matt Daly will be coming home P7, Alex Smith will be coming home at some point or another, if you can avoid them. There's a wall there, there's another wall just there as well, you can see it on screen. And there might be another wall on your left here as you head around Parabolica, but it should be Alex Smith now crossing the line to round out the podium and take P3 here at Monza. So that rounds out the field for race 1. We'll be